very good afternoon to all of you. It's a very interesting, section of the day. Most of us are vying for our tea, trying to stay awake. But I'll be very brief. But let me start with a very important question. How many of you have really heard about ONDC? How many of you really know what ONDC is? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's a very poor show. I don't think we are doing a very good job, of explaining ONDC, of making ONDC well known and how it's working. How many of you do e-commerce transactions? Okay, 5, 6? That's unbelievable. I don't believe it. I need all the hands up. I think all of us are doing, e-commerce transactions, and the way we have seen the e-commerce transactions, we've all looked at Amazon, we have all looked at Flipkart, we've looked at ShopClues, Myntra, so on and so forth. But do you understand, or may I just ask if any one of you who has heard about ONDC, what is the fundamental difference between Flipkart and ONDC, or Amazon and ONDC, and why there was a need of ONDC? Because Flipkart, Amazon are already there. Why did you think the government thought about creating an e-commerce framework? Let me not open my cards in the beginning itself. Cool. Let me just make an attempt on explaining what ONDC is all about. I think since morning, we've been hearing about DPI, DPGs. Aadhaar is the feather in the cap. That's where the whole DPI journey started in India, where people started talking about creating population scale, systems which are not only highly scalable, they're also interoperable, right? And that is where these standards and the standards of transaction actually started coming to the fore. The whole DPI aspect is a purely born in India concept, right? While there are citizen services which are available across the globe in some form or the other, but they're all fragmented. It was the first time in India where the government actually started thinking about how do we bring all these services under one roof, keeping it interoperable, keeping it infinitely scalable, and therefore the concept of DPI originated. Now, to draw a parallel between a digital public infrastructure and a physical infrastructure, the government built roads. Once the roads are built, the economic wheels start turning on the road. You have trucks which are traveling, you have cars which are going, so there are more sales of cars. There are manufacturing hubs getting created so that they're all connected with each other, raw material can move. This is how you keep the economic wheels turning. Similarly, when you need your digital economic wheel turning, you really need an infrastructure which fundamentally allows the variety of formations around the standards and the protocols that get developed. This was the foundation of DPI, and the proponents of DPI figured out this way early in the game, where if you are dealing with the population scale of India, you cannot believe that a particular platform will be able to solve for this problem. Therefore, there is a need of creating atomic units or atomic economic units which are able to transact with each other seamlessly. So this is where ONDC was actually born, and fundamentally ONDC stands for Open Network for Digital Commerce. Unlike Flipkart or Amazon, which are fundamentally a platform where the buyer and the seller come together and then they exchange economic values, ONDC has visualized this whole ecosystem as a network. Even within Amazon or within a Flipkart or any other typical e-commerce website, while you have a brand name of Myntra, underlying Myntra, there are many cogs in the wheel that turn to make a transaction happen. From catalog to order management to cancellation to logistics to returns, so on and so forth, right? The whole concept of ONDC was around unbundling this value chain, right? You have user base, you have eyeballs to in cash for, you have banking applications, you have social network websites, you have insurance websites, so on and so forth, and there are people who actually transact. The need for these people is how do you make your consumers stick with a particular app? They need some sort of a value addition into their landscapes. On the same side, the sellers basically get either they onboard their catalog to a particular platform and transact, but the problem is then how do they generate the demand? And that again goes back to a platform, and we all know there is no platform in the world which is infinitely scalable, and that is where it actually came to came to a need of an interoperable framework. Especially during COVID times, what happened was the whole economic and the social wheels actually came to a cranking halt. Once it got halted, the problem that the government faced was the last mile connectivity, where the products were not able to reach to the end customer because of the lockdown. And this is where they found that the existing platforms who were given all the passes were not able to fulfill the kind of demand that COVID generated. And that is why Ministry of Commerce, the DPIT, under aegis looked at formation of ONDC. ONDC was fundamentally nothing but unbundling of all these value chains, and the whole value chain can interact and interoperate with each other independently and in isolation, depending upon what is the need. Now, when I say unbundling and interoperability, this one slide actually explains how exactly these two things are working. You have a buyer side platform, which is fundamentally bringing demand on the network. Now, there are a variety of buyer applications. I gave you example of banking apps. I gave you example of social network websites. I gave you example of maps also, right? So there is Maples app, there is Google Map, which is integrating into ONDC, and they basically want their users to now also cross-operate and still make money on those transactions, because they already have eyeballs, they already know how to monetize these eyeballs, and for their consumers to stick to a particular application, they are looking for avenues where they can add value without getting into the real e-commerce business. They don't need to hold any inventory. The inventory is held by the supply side of the network. So if you see on the left hand side, or on your left, is fundamentally a platform view where everything is happening on a single platform being running out of capacity at some point in time. If you see the e-commerce growth in India, it has grown from about 0.5, 0.6% in mid 2000s to only about 8% in 2020, and it has stagnated there. In last couple of years, of course, COVID brought about a certain jump, and we suddenly saw a jump of about 3 to 4% points. But then beyond that, how do we actually penetrate into tier 2, tier 3 cities? While the supply is there, the demand is there, there is no way that these two people can actually operate because there is no logistics. Therefore, on the right hand side, what you see is a real network where you have logistics suppliers which are basically available across India. You have buyer applications, the demand side, which is available across India. And this is how now the e-commerce has started penetrating into the tier 2 cities. So ONDC was basically a concept to create a democratized and equitable e-commerce framework for anybody to come and operate on. There could be a small tea seller. By the way, ONDC has a lot of street vendors also operating on the network. So if you are really craving for that golgappa from your street side shop, you can always go on ONDC. And when I say on ONDC, you will not find any app called ONDC because ONDC is a network. Therefore, you have to choose one of your buyer apps, and one of the more popular buyer apps are Paytm, MagicPen, My Store, and there are a lot of other small time apps. Even some of the media websites also are integrating now. Jagran is taking lead. It's going to go live. It's going to make big announcements. It's already live, but it's going to make big announcements on 31st of July, who are basically bringing a pool of demand onto the network, right? So this is how this whole ONDC as a concept is working in the ecosystem. Multiple opportunities are available. As I said, DPI is no more bound within the Indian boundaries. It is actually transcending. We are already live in Singapore, although it is only export transactions. The African Union is very keenly looking at ONDC. We've been talking to Kenyan governments, we've been talking to Ghana, and we've been talking to many other people. And we'll come to what we are doing for UP in the later slides. But then all I want to say is that DPI is made in India for the globe concept, and the whole world is now looking at the success of DPIs and adopting in their places. GST portal was one of those DPIs which is now being adopted. E-invoicing was a concept which has already been adopted in Saudi Arabia in a little modification, but exactly in the same framework. Ireland is implementing e-invoices. US, the talks and the study has already been done, and they are contemplating how and when they're going to activate e-invoicing. You see, the whole DPI framework is now transcending Indian boundaries and trying to penetrate into the larger part of the economies who have started seeing value coming out of these citizen-centric population scale systems. So while domestically we are seeing a very strong potential and very strong adoption, we are also seeing the adoption happening globally. Diverse transactions, fundamentally if you look at ONDC, it is not a category specific. If you go to Myntra, you do fashion. If you go to, let's say, Blinkit or maybe Big Basket, it's more grocery. If you go to Amazon, it's a little mixed, but then still the number of categories they service are limited, right? But with ONDC, the magic is a particular buyer app can actually activate as many number of categories without having a knowledge of that category, as long as they respect the seller's conditions on the network. So being on Paytm, you can buy a travel ticket, you can do event booking, you can buy grocery, you can buy food, you can buy metro tickets, you can book a ride. All of those things are happening on Paytm in a single platform, and that is the power of network that it actually brings in. The financial services are also live on the network. We are seeing personal loans and credit loans, which are being and invoice-based loans, which are being which are live on the network, and they are happening as we speak. These are some opportunities. I invite the whole tech community to come and build with us. Whether it is in form of adapters, whether it's in form of some sort of a platform which can create demand or supply on the network. Logistics could be one specific element. There could be lightweight apps. WhatsApp is a classic example. Now WhatsApp is also coming up with their development interfaces. You can actually sort of develop a whole application behind WhatsApp APIs. Catalog digitization for any specific individual to be live on the digital network with their products have to have a digital catalog, and this has been majority of the problem that mostly tier 2, tier 3 cities faced. There are limited numbers, about 60% of the total SKUs that get sold in India are unlabeled or private labeled. Creating and maintaining a catalog at this scale is a problem, and that is why there are cataloging companies who have an opportunity to build a solution using AI and using some sort of data seeding to handle that. One of the things, and one of the most important things I want to talk about, I know I'm getting a warning now, so I'll be soon off stage. So thank you so much for the warning. But I want to talk about agri, and all of you've heard about ENAM, the E-National Agricultural Market. ENAM typically in a mandi ecosystem operates the way you see on the screen right now. There is a gate entry by a farmer. He basically he/she gets their crop assayed. They create a catalog entry in a system on ENAM. Then of course there is a payment and the pricing gets fixed. Invoicing happens in an online or an offline mode, but this platform supports the online payment, and then of course finally the gate exit happens and the systems get delivered. This is where ONDC actually developed an agri stack for India. Fundamentally unbundled this whole value chain from a platform to the network nodes. You say assaying as a node is available on the network, where the farmers can actually go and get their crop assayed and invite better prices. And so is farmer can also do selling on the network by creating catalog on their own on the platform and are able to sell at a better price. We are also working on certain models where AI can be used, where even before the crop get harvested, it can actually be assayed by simply clicking 7 or 8 pictures of their farm, and farmer, while the harvesting season is not come yet, can still ask for bids on their crops and be able to benefit from it. And then there are barrage of services, the input services, especially the fertilizers, land surveys, pesticides, anything can actually be bought online, and all of these become actually a network node. So the farmer end of the day gets benefited by getting prices at the real market, by getting products at the real market prices, and then of course being able to sell outside. I just explained the agri ecosystem before I'm really kicked out of the stage. And there are many of the innovative aspects that are happening. All of you have used UPI QR code. Now if you go to a shop which is ONDC enabled, you will find a ONDC QR code which can be scanned to explore the catalog and make purchases online. You can make the purchases by simply scanning the QR code, and then this is the first use case that has gone live, but it is actually limitless. A brand can actually do advertisement using the QR code which is available on ONDC, right? And you will soon see these big QR codes coming up on hoardings which you can scan and make purchases. This is the whole ecosystem I have already talked about. There are multiple categories live on the network, and this is supposedly my last slide, and this is a quick glance of what's happening on ONDC. If you're not on ONDC, whether as a buyer or as a seller, I think this is the time that you should explore. This is made in India e-commerce framework, far more scalable, and I would say infinitely scalable. I mean, the value can actually come from the ecosystem to do digital transactions. With that, I come to the end of my slides. Thank you so much for being a patient listener.